All right, what's going on, people? Look, I have something that I want to kind of discuss because a lot of people may not know about centuries. And it may be because when you was in school, grammar school, high school, that, when they were probably so-called teaching this, it went through one ear and out the other. Now, the reason why I'm going to bring this up because I realized discussing this with a few people, a lot of people were lacking in this knowledge. And I was like, whoa, wow. So let me explain something to you all about centuries. And it's common sense if you let it soak in. Listen, let's just start with this example. When a baby is born, is 1 day old. Okay, cool. Now, as the baby begin to grow and add on days, months, and that first year, that baby is 1 year old, right? The baby don't begin with 0. Listen, the baby is not 0 year old. Just remember that the baby begins their year with that 1. Always remember that. And if the baby is blessed to live a century, the baby will be 100 years old. 100 years old will mark that baby a century. You see what I'm saying? From 1 all the way to 100 is a century. That's how you count down the centuries. That's how you mark the centuries. The baby is not 2 centuries. The baby is not 0 centuries or a century. I can't even call it because 0 is nothing. But I'm trying to get y'all to understand something before I go further with the naming the decades and the years and stuff like that, so you can understand in the elementary way right now. So just remember that what mark a baby to an adulthood would be all the way from 1 year old to 100. It marks that person to be 1 century old. Okay, cool. Great example. 1 to 100 is a century. Okay? Meaning, let's just say, hey, we started marking the calendar with a day of discovering the earth or America or whatever. We're not going to go there with how did it start, with who created the calendar, what day it began, and we're not going there because that would be probably profound for this teaching right now. But by example, let's just say that the day began 100 years ago. The day will begin on that calendar 1 day. It will not begin with 0 because 0 is nothing. It has to begin with a number, and that number will be the first day. If the year began with that 1 day, it will be 1 day leading all the way up to 100, meaning it will be 100 years since this world or the calendar years has been, meaning that is the first century. Remember that baby from 1 year old all the way to 100 years old is a century. That's the first century. The second century, listen, remember how we are beginning our days. The second century will be the beginning at what? 101. Remember, nothing won't start at 0. It's nothing. Everything has to start with that 1 number. So the second century is from 101 to what? 200 years. That 200-year ending marks it the second century. 200 years is 2 centuries. Okay, cool. Let's jump ahead. The reason why I'm making this video because I've been having multiple discussions with people who are dodos. Huh? So, For those who miss my channels and just won't watch them because they scared of truth, I got another one. I asked someone about the 17th century. They said 17th century is 1700 on out. That's wrong. How could the 17th century begin at 1701? And I understand people could be confused about that. Well, how is it at the beginning? Well, 1700 is within the 1601 beginning all the way into 1700. Huh? The year of 1601 is the beginning of the 17th century. Why? Because 1601 all the way to the year 1700 marks that 17th century, 1700 years. So the ending gives it that rule. It gives it that title that it earned. 1700 years. You see what I'm saying? At 1700, at that 1700 year calendar, it marks 1700 years. So that's the not the beginning, but that's the ending of the 17th century. See, I'm getting confused. I'm trying to break this down for people to understand because there was a lot of commotion about it. And sometimes when you get deep with trying to explain something that others make difficult, you get tongue twisted at times on trying to explain it. That's why you got to pray for wisdom so you won't look stupid. So people, just remember this. When the ending of a century marks 100 years. So when someone say, yeah, you know, we're in the 21st century, and you be like, wait a minute, this is 20 such and such. This is 200 years. You know what I'm saying? Has we're in the 21st century because the beginning of this century marked at 2001. 20, not 2000. 2000 marks 2000 century from the beginning of 1900 all the way to the year 2000. That was the 20th century. The 21st century is the beginning of 2001. 2001 all the way to this century coming up. We are in the current 21st century. 2100 will be 2100 years. See? 2101. Remember, a year begins with 1. 2101 is the beginning. It's the beginning of the 22nd century because the ending of that century would be 2200 years. I want you all to understand something. Forgive me if I might have sounded a little confusing because it can be when you're trying to explain it and you got numbers in the air. You know what I'm saying? But from the beginning of me explaining it from a baby all the way up to 100 years old, it's like, okay, I hope they get it. You know what I'm saying? So remember, a year begins with 1, not 0. You see what I'm saying? The century, maybe I should have said that. A century begins with 1, not 0. You can't begin nothing with no 0. A lot of people like, yeah, this is the beginning of, the 20th century because of the year 2000 on out. You see what I'm saying? 2001, 2002, 2000, but it began with 2000, so they marched the 20th century. That's not true. The 20th century ended at the year 2000, but the beginning of 20th century was 1901. Remember that. Every century begins with 1, and it ends with that century. It ends with 00. Which marks it and makes it a whole century. 1 year old all the way to 100 year old. years old is a century. Now just think of it when someone asks you blindly, hey, yeah, back in the 17th century, just remember when someone always called that number is actually speaking the number. Just think about it, it's speaking the number before 17. I try to teach elementary, bro. If someone say, yeah, back in 18th century, just think about the 1700s. Somebody say back in the 19th century, think about the 1800s. 21st century, well, that's now. Year 2025, from the beginning of 2001 all the way out to 2100 is the 21st century. So, like I say, I might get kind of, but I hope that someone understand how to know the centuries when they call it out. It's very important to know that, people, because you have some people that say, I don't know what century this is. I don't know what century that is. I don't know. And we're not talking about children. We're talking about grown people who lack the understanding, who lacks the knowledge about centuries. That's embarrassing. So I hope I help someone out. Shalom.